You don't need a luxury kitchen to prepare gourmet meals. My name is Dennis. I live in a mobile home in a trailer park, and this is my kitchen. I feel like inventing something today. I've had this idea rolling around in my mind. A lot of times when I do these videos, I might start off with a recipe that, for example, I've seen in a restaurant magazine, and the recipe has to be configured down for home use. Or I might see a recipe and I think, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. And if I test it, sure enough, it doesn't work. And sometimes I get ideas from watching somebody else cook. For example, I just did a pizza recipe, pizza video, because I saw on TV someone making pizza. And I thought, I can go over to Kmart and for $5 I can get a better pizza. Baking it on a pizza stone doesn't make it gourmet. There's more you can do. Anyways, I've got lamb in the freezer, and I've got a little bit of artichoke hearts left in a jar in my refrigerator. And I'm wondering, what if I were to saute thinly sliced lamb with garlic, olive oil, and thinly sliced artichoke hearts, and then make an olive pesto. That's a regular basil pesto, but also grinding black olives into it. It's really good. I've done it before. And then serve all that mixed with fettuccine noodles. That sounds like it might be good. So that's what I want to do today. Let's start making this lamb and fettuccine dinner. I'm going to make my own fettuccine, but you don't need to do this. The fettuccine noodles they have in the store are fine. I have a pasta maker. I have the ingredients. So why not make it myself? I actually enjoy doing it. So I'm going to start off with a couple of eggs. I figure 1 egg per person if I'm feeding big eaters or the pasta is going to be the main portion of the meal. If it's going to be a side dish, then figure 1 egg feeds 2 people. I'm only going to use 2 eggs today. I think in the recipe I'm going to indicate use 4 eggs. And then maybe half a teaspoon of salt, something like that. And get this mixed up well. You can if you want to, and I think I will. Put a tablespoon or so of extra virgin olive oil in there. That tends to make the pasta a little bit smoother, I've found, working with oil. Now, how much flour do you use? Well, it all depends on how big your eggs are. If I'm remembering correctly, I use about a half a cup, maybe more, of flour per egg. This is my durum wheat semolina. It's a hard flour. That's a 1/4 cup. So I'm going to start off putting a 1/4 cup of durum wheat semolina and a 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. Bring this together. And this is how I make pasta. I've seen on TV where they say put your flour in a mound on the center of the counter and then make a little well in the middle and break your eggs into the well and then bring it together. I do it in a bowl because it's easier to bring the bowl to the sink to wash it than to bring the counter to the sink to wash it. So I just keep adding flour until I get the consistency that I want. Obviously, that's not a pasta dough, right? So we go a little bit more. Another 1/4 cup of each. And we just keep going. And eventually I'm going to get a dough that's going to be stiff and dry enough that I can knead it. So I'm going to put maybe about half to 3/4 of that cup in there, because I think my dough is starting to come up to the point where it'll be dry enough to knead. That looks pretty good. All right, let me prepare my counter now for kneading this dough. I've got a duster here. This is actually a powdered sugar duster, but I used it for flour because I work with flour a lot more than powdered sugar. And what I'm going to do is just start kneading this. If it seems too sticky, I can work a little bit more flour into it. I want it to be soft enough and pliable enough to work with, but I don't want it to be sticky. Maybe a little bit sticky, but usually I aim for as little stickiness as possible. I'm going to work a little bit more flour into that. Now again, you don't need to make your own pasta from scratch. I just think it's kind of fun to do. But you do need to set aside some time for it because pasta isn't ready to work with as soon as it's kneaded. It has to sit for a while, at least an hour. I'll put it in the refrigerator for several hours. If I'm going to be storing it overnight, which I'm planning to do today actually, I might do that. Then I will vacuum seal it in a vacuum seal pouch to keep the air out of it. Because what will happen with the egg yolks is if the oxygen gets to it, the oxygen will darken those egg yolks. They oxidize, and then you end up with this grayish green ugly mass. I don't know whether it's bad for you or not, whether it's poisonous. It certainly doesn't look appetizing. So I've never tried to eat it. But if you vacuum seal it, it'll stay nice and golden yellow in the refrigerator for days. So that's all it is to kneading the dough. You can see it didn't take a lot of time. It's not like kneading bread. You just want to bring it together until it's smooth, wrap this up, and put it aside for a while. So there's my pasta now ready to go into the refrigerator. The reason why you want to let pasta dough sit for a while is because it gives the flour time to absorb some of the moisture. It will improve the elasticity a little bit. If I were to run this through my pasta machine right now, I would tend to get more cracking around the edges as it goes through the rollers. By letting it sit and letting the eggs and flour get better acquainted, it's usually smoother to work with, less cracking around the edges. It's just more malleable, more pliable. It just works better by letting it sit for a while. Let's take a moment to talk about pesto, shall we? Classic ingredients for pesto are fresh basil, garlic, typically grated Parmesan cheese. I'm going to use Romano. Pine nuts, if you have them, they're kind of expensive. So I went through my cupboards. I have some old walnuts up there that are going out of expiration. The date is coming up very quickly, in fact later this month, so I decided to use these up. This is about 4 ounces of walnuts, and then of course extra virgin olive oil. One pesto that I enjoy making to eat with lamb includes olives. I made a special trip down to the Italian market today to buy these olives. These are sun-dried, and I believe they're oil cured. They're very black olives, very rich in flavor. I have about 30 olives there that I have to remove the pits from. I'm not sure about the weight. I know it's about 4 ounces, 113 grams with the pits in. I'll try to remember to weigh these after I take all the pits out. So the first thing I need to do is pit my olives. This is kind of messy work. You want to just cut down into the olive to the pit inside, expose it, and pull it out. There's the pit. That's what I'm trying to remove. Doesn't matter if the olives get broken up in the process of doing this because they're all going to get ground up later on into the pesto. Okay, so you see what I'm doing here. I've got about 30 of these to do. So there are my 30 pitted olives now. I weighed these and they came to exactly 4.0 ounces. So that's 113 grams. One of the issues I have with a lot of recipes that talk about making pesto is they just simply say something like, put the basil leaves and the other ingredients in a food processor, pulverize it, and you got pesto. Well, no, not really. And the reason why is to get really good flavored pesto, you have to get the juice out of the leaves, out of those cells that make up the leaves. You don't want to just chop up the leaves, you want to crush them. And that's why the old way of making pesto was with a mortar and pestle, so that you could grind the leaves down. I find the easiest way is to put the leaves and some of the ingredients in a Ziploc bag because it's sturdy, it's durable, and I whack it with something. This is my whacker spoon. It's the only freebie I ever got for having a website. I used to use a rubber mallet. I tried the smooth part of a tenderizing mallet, and I would just pound the basil leaves in the bag until they were well bruised and the juices were running. This is the best thing I ever used because it wouldn't break the bag at all. It's smooth and rounded. All the other ways would eventually break the bag somewhere, and then the basil would squirt out. So this is what I use. It's called a whacker spoon. I think they still sell these, whackerspoon.com. You can look it up. That's what works for me. So I'm going to show you how I crush the basil leaves. I use an old piece of Korean countertop. This is actually the cutout from the sink so that I won't damage my wooden counter when I start beating on the pestle, on the basil rather. But the first thing I need to do is pluck all the leaves off the stems because I don't want to put the stems in it. I can discard those stems, or if you want, you can freeze them and use them next time you make vegetable stock. I don't save them. So I got quite a bit of basil here. I'm actually got 4 ounces, 113 grams of basil with the stems in, and I'm going to pluck all the leaves off, so that's all I have left are the leaves. So there are now all of my plucked basil leaves. Again, that's from 4 ounces of fresh basil. I'm going to put that in my Ziploc bag. Okay, I've got some garlic cloves here. I'm going to put 3 to 4. Let's use 4, and I'll save those other 4 for when I cook the lamb. So 4 garlic cloves, 4 ounces of, you can use pine nuts. I'm using walnuts that are near the end of their expiration date. And then I've also used almonds. Almonds make great pesto. I'm going to squeeze the air out of there and seal that shut. And then with my whacker spoon, I'm just going to keep hammering this, hammering this, hammering this. This takes a while to get all this broken down. So there it is. I'm looking at that. The basil looks crushed and wet, all bruised, dark. That's the indication that now I've released that juice from the cells of the leaves. Now this can go into a food processor. I have my food processor set up. There's all my crushed basil and the garlic and the walnuts. Now I can pulverize this into a pesto. So therefore I'm going to put my crushed basil in there. This is 4 ounces of grated, you can use Parmesan. I'm using Romano because I like Romano better. So that's 4 ounces or 113 grams. Here's my 4 ounces, 113 grams of black olives. Those ones that I love. And then I'm going to put in about half a cup of olive oil to start. This is extra virgin olive oil. So half a cup, that's about 120 milliliters. I can always add more oil. And then I've got to put a piece of plastic over the top. Hang on. This is a guy thing. I put a piece of plastic wrap over the top of the bowl before I put the cover on so that I keep the cover clean. One less thing to wash. Now I can start pulverizing this. That looks good, but it is going to need more oil, so I'm going to put the other half cup of that oil in, and you can use even another half cup, another 120 milliliters of oil. There's different, I think of different thicknesses of pesto. If I'm going to be using it to coat the outside of a roast lamb before I bake it, then I don't want it too oily because I don't want it to drizzle down off the meat. But if I'm going to be using it for pasta, like I'm going to be using this, then I want the pesto to drizzle down into the pasta. So I want a more oily pasta. So you can make it as pasty or as saucy as you like. I want you to see a close-up of my pesto. It's not too oily. I could possibly add some more oil to that. But see how it's not green? It's this dark color? Well, that's those black olives. They're really dark in that. And I have to take one taste to see what that's going to taste like. So out comes my red handle tasting spoon. Oh, that is rich. That is strong. Has a nice strong flavor of those olives. So I'm going to transfer this to a bowl and set this aside, and that's my pesto done. I'm pretty much nearing the finishing of my prep work now. Next, I want to start cutting up some lamb. I've talked about lamb before. I buy the leg of lamb, the boneless leg at the warehouse store, and then I cut it up into portions and put it in the freezer. It's easier to work with because whether I'm cooking for one person, 2, 4 people, I can just pick out what I need. I'm only going to cook up 2 of these portions because I need 1 plate for my tasting and 1 to do my finished photography of the day. Figure about, to feed 4 to 6 people, figure about a pound of lamb and a pound of dry fettuccine noodles. That's about 454 grams each. For me, I'm just going to cook up what I need. So I need to slice these next. So as I mentioned, I'm going to slice up a couple of these pieces. These I put in the microwave to thaw them lightly because while they're still partially frozen, they'll slice up more easily. And I want to just do thin slices here. This is what's going to make this cook very quickly. If there's fat in it, that's okay. That's going to rend in the pan anyways. Lamb does tend to have some fat in it. I was thinking while I was doing this that this is where all the gourmet cooking comes from. It's not from standing at the stove. It's doing all the prep work in advance. Ask any chef in a good restaurant, and they will tell you that long before the front doors open, the cooks are busy in the kitchen doing all the prep work for the day's dinners. So you can see how quickly that goes. I have that other piece to do, and then I can start working on my artichoke hearts. I love working with artichoke hearts. And these are from a jar. And I want them to look like artichoke hearts. So I'm not going to chop them up too much. I want the pieces to be identifiable. I think artichoke hearts just work well in a recipe that has strong flavors. And this one has strong flavors because of that very strongly flavored pesto that I made earlier. So you can see what I'm doing here. I'm just going to chop these up coarsely. And then I'll be pretty near ready to cook. The last thing I need to do here is roll and cut my pasta for my fettuccine. I'm only using half of the pasta that I made. That's enough for 4 people, I think, for a meal this large. I only need 2 plates of food, one for my tasting clip at the end of this video, and one for taking my final photographs of the day, my royals. So I have my pasta machine set up here. Of course, if you don't need to do it this way, you can just buy the dry fettuccine noodles they sell at the store, or egg noodles, anything that works for you. I just like making my own pasta. I'm going to cut this in half because that's getting kind of long. And see how smoothly this rolls with very little cracking along the edges now that it's had a chance to sit wrapped for a while. It's very easy to work with. Okay, so there's one of my pieces, and here's the other piece. That's my rolling. And yes, that is a plane going overhead. Yes, I live near the airport. I want long fettuccine noodles, I think. So I'm going to cut these each in half. That's going to make long noodles, but I don't mind taking the risk. Okay. Now, I'm going to cut these through my fettuccine roller, and I'm making sure these are separated, and I'm going to flour these well so they don't stick to each other. And actually, to prevent that from happening, sticking, I might as well just flour my dough here. Much nicer. I may have mentioned that I have water heating on the stove to the boil to boil my pasta. Just about done here. I've got a skillet heating on the stove here, into which I'm going to put a few tablespoons of cooking olive oil. That's my regular pure olive oil. And then into that I'm going to add a few cloves of garlic. 2 or 3, 4 if they're small enough. I'm getting to the end of my garlic supply here. I got to buy more garlic. Let's see, one more, I guess. Small one. All right. There's my garlic. And don't panic, I'm going to add a couple of anchovy fillets. I'm going to turn this heat down. Those anchovy fillets will break up very quickly. They don't add a fishiness to my dish. They add kind of a depth of flavor. And then there go my slices of lamb. And I want to cook these until it's slightly pink, cooked almost all the way through, but not quite. Think medium on the lamb. Meanwhile, I've got to start cooking my pasta because my water is just coming up to the boil. You can see I got a few red pieces there. That's fine because in this next step, I'll finish any cooking. I'm going to add my artichoke hearts and heat that up. And then finally flavor this with pesto. I'm going to put some pesto in there now. Not a lot, because this is a very strong flavored pesto. And it'll overwhelm the flavor of that dish very quickly. And then finally, this is where I would use my extra virgin olive oil. Add a good quarter to a third of a cup, maybe half a cup. What's that, 60 to 120 milliliters. Turn the heat off. And that is my lamb. All that's left to do now is to plate it and see how good it tastes. So how I would plate this is get some of my noodles, my fettuccine onto my plate. Plenty of fettuccine. Let's see, that should be enough, I guess. And then spoon my lamb and artichokes and olive pesto over the top. That should be plenty there. And then the last thing I would do to dress this is put a little bit of extra virgin olive oil over the top. I think that's a nice way to dress a lot of these dishes. Clean the plate for presentation. And there it is. My lamb and artichokes with fettuccine. The last step, of course, is to see how good this tastes. So there it is. Now you'll notice I didn't put any salt or pepper in any of this. The pesto, and because of those rich, dark flavored, strong flavored dark olives, that adds all the flavor you need. You don't really need salt and pepper with this. In fact, it might overpower it a little bit. So it's fine the way it is. If you use milder olives, you might want to use salt and pepper. Let's see what I got here. That is so rich and savory. Gonna get a bit of my artichoke. There is so much flavor to that. Oh, that is fantastic. So excuse me. I'm going to enjoy my lamb and artichoke fettuccine. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit the White Trash Cooking website and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.